So now that the dust is settling over Vikram Pandit's sudden and surprise departure from Citigroup, the next big question, why did he go? Well, joining us on the phone from our London bureau is Reuters Breaking Views U.S. editor Rob Cox. Now, Rob, you just spoke to Vikram Pandit. What's his take? I mean, did he give you any sense as to why he left?
Well, he spent 5 years there, and he came into the job with a very clear mandate to stabilize the bank, to restore confidence in the bank, and banks are all about confidence, and to rebuild capital. I think he feels that he's done all of those things, and it's sort of an incontrovertible fact that indeed it does have a strong capital now. It does indeed. There's a confidence with clients and with people inside the bank. So he felt it was time for him to move on, and he told Mike O'Neill, the chairman, that yesterday, and Mike O'Neill accepted his resignation. I don't think he tried to keep him. Felt probably, there was probably a mutual sense that, and this is not what Vikram says, but I think there was probably a sense that, yeah, indeed, it is time to go. It's a new era for Citigroup in that respect.
But was it his decision, or was the board pressuring him to leave? I mean, this is all of a sudden.
Vikram had said it is his decision, and he had come to this decision after some time. But I think it's clear, looking at the past, say, 6-7 months, that he has had a pretty rough go of things, and not always his own fault. I mean, some of the things that happened to Citigroup weren't necessarily self-inflicted by the CEO. But if you look back, go back to March when the Federal Reserve told Citigroup that it could not return capital through dividends or buybacks on the dimension it had hoped to do so. That was a real sting to the bank. Now, we at the time at Breaking Views thought that was an odd decision. I mean, by the Federal Reserve. In fact, its math was hard to figure out. And you talk to other bankers, they were quite sympathetic to some of the confusion at the time. But I think in general, he that was it was a sort of a dark mark for Vikram. Say a month after that, in April, you had the rejection of his pay package by shareholders. That looked pretty bad, even though actually at the end of the day, that is the responsibility of the remuneration committee of the board, which was led then by Mike O'Neill, who's now the chairman, and of course the chairman, who at the time was Dick Parsons. And they should have basically vetted that with shareholders to make sure that there wasn't some sort of ignominious defeat, as there was.
Right, and this is after he had been paid, I guess, $1 for the first 2 years, but more than $15 million that the shareholders rejected. How much of it was it, do you think, overpay?
Well, I don't think it was overpay. Vikram's a wealthy man. He made hundreds of millions of dollars when he sold his hedge fund to Citigroup in the first instance. I think, though, at a certain point, it couldn't have been fun to run a bank where the Fed, the regulators are kind of, telling you, shutting you down. Sometimes with good reason, and I'm sure that the Fed is worried about, the overall health of all the banks. But there's that in the background. Then you're not getting paid for it, and it looks like you were being greedy, even though, arguably that was not. It was Dick Parsons who screwed up that one. Then you had, this deal. Not so long ago, just in September, they finally did a deal or agreed to sell the remainder of Smith Barney, the brokerage, to Morgan Stanley at a price that turned out to be far lower than the one that they had marked on their books. They had $22 billion marked on their books for the value of this business. It was an independent group, or arbiters, investment bankers, came to a $13.5 billion valuation. So that was a huge delta. Now, you could argue that was trying to, it was a bit of game theory gone wrong. Right? If you keep it at $22 billion, you believe it's $22 billion, you have better negotiating power. But in the end, didn't work out quite that way. And so the bank had to take yesterday a $4.9 billion write-down on its results.
Rob, on the phone, Vikram Pandit talked about capital, about confidence. But what was the tone of the conversation? How was he feeling in general?
I think he said, one of the things he said is, look, I feel pretty good about where the bank is now. I mean, I've accomplished the main tasks. Arguably, the next few years of Citibank will be about executing that and delivering, returning capital to shareholders. And that's a sort of different phase. I think he's put a bright lining to it. He said this is not the last thing he expected to do. So I don't think we're going to see the last of Vikram Pandit in the financial arena. So I think that's how he felt. That's how he felt upbeat But of course, my own perspective is that this wouldn't be the way I would have thought the best way for Vikram to leave. It would have been better for him to kind of leave with a little bit more of a grace period, as it were, to say, look, I'm stepping down at the end of the year. Mike Corbett will be my successor.
Right.
But his view was, look, why shouldn't, if a new guy's coming in, he shouldn't have to deal with the old guy's strategy and budget, which is also fair.
Let's talk about that new guy, the new CEO, Mike Corbett. Does Pandit think that Citi is in safe hands with under Corbett?
Yes, he does. He thinks he's quite competent. He's a real nuts and bolts guy, I think is what he told me, and he's been there for some time, and he is going to make the trains run on time. And so I think he said that he wouldn't do this. He wouldn't have resigned or asked to leave yesterday if he didn't feel that the bank was on a strong footing and it had a good succession plan in place.
All right, you said making the trains run on time. What about a smoother ride, especially with regulators with Corbett at the helm?
I don't know what Vikram's take is on that, but I think looking at it objectively, a change at the top. Remember, you had this issue with what was called the C-car, the in March, where they were trying to get money to give back to shareholders. You also have had a history, while Vikram has been in charge, of some difficult relations with regulators, notably with the FDIC. When Sheila Bair was running it, her team really wanted to get rid of the entire management team at Citigroup. Look, you turn over a new leaf. I think this probably bodes well for Citigroup's relations with regulators and ultimately its plan to return capital to shareholders.
All right, we'll be watching. Thanks a lot, Rob.
No problem. My pleasure.
Our thanks to Reuters Breaking Views U.S. editor Rob Cox. I'm Fred Katayama, and this is Reuters.